I welcome you all to the fifth special interest group session on artificial intelligence. This is fifth in a series that we have been having each month on AI. These sessions recur after 4 weeks' time, and previously we have shared some amazing work from Islamia University, from folks over in Germany who have worked extensively using machine learning and AI in various sectors. So this week we'll be having with us Dr. Malik Jahan Khan. He is associate professor at Namal Institute, Mianwali. He received his PhD in 2012 from Syed Babar Ali School of Engineering and Science at LUMS. And he'll be sharing with you some of the applications of machine learning in agriculture, which in our country is one of the greatest contributors of GDP. Also, we'll have a general discussion session after Dr. Malik's talk. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use that opportunity and interact with Dr. Malik. For those of you who would like to come back and listen to this again, we will make available the recording and the slide deck on our website. And the recording will also be available on the YouTube channel. Ahmed Jafar from my team will be reaching out via email also to share these contents of this session. So normally we'll begin with a opening set of opening remarks from Dr. Rashid Ali, and we'll wait for a minute or two for him to join, and then we'll start. So I just spoke to Dr. Rashid. I think he is driving right now and in traffic, so he will be having challenge in joining. So we'll go over to Dr. Malik Jahan, and Dr. over to you.
Thank you very much, Hashim sir. Actually, I was expecting a surprise opening talk from Hash Malik, but I will start and then we can take him on board towards the end of the session probably.
I think yes. बाद में अगर session होगा तो maybe we can do that unless Ash would prefer to join in.
I think he's there, right?
Yes.
Malik Jahan Sahab, Assalamu alaikum. I'm on the call, but a bit under the weather, so my apologies for not saying much.
Walaikum salam. Very nice to hear you after a long time.
Ji, I'm so sorry I've not been well lately, so forgive me for.
May you get well soon.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Walaikum salam. Hashim sir, can you see the screen?
Ji, we can.
So may I start?
Ji, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the session on applications of machine learning in agriculture sector. My talk is actually divided into three broader components. I come from Namal Institute, Mianwali, so I'll be taking this opportunity to introduce Namal to the audience who may not be aware of Namal very briefly. And then I'll be talking about two projects which we are undertaking at Namal under the umbrella of machine learning, and we are trying to leverage machine learning in the agriculture sector. Starting with where I'm based in right now, Namal is an infant institute relatively, and Namal's vision is to become a center of academic excellence for rural uplift and development through two major missions. One is educating the bright youth who will embody Namal values and will contribute to organizations and community, and finding innovative solutions to the rural challenges by highly trained academics. It was founded by Mr. Imran Khan in 2008, and we started as an affiliate college of University of Bradford in UK. Later on, we got affiliated with UT Lahore, and a couple of years back, we attained degree awarding status from the government of Punjab. So now we are operating as an independent university. More than 95% of the student body at Namal is on scholarships. So there are two categories of scholarships. One is merit-based, another one is need-based. And we have highly competitive admissions. Almost 25 candidates compete for one seat. We have a very good placement rate in the industry, as well as in the higher education sector. And we offer 4 undergraduate programs in the fields of computer science, electrical engineering, business administration, and mathematics. Our faculty over here is highly qualified with more than 90% with PhD degrees, and students enjoy a very good teacher to student ratio. All right, so this was a very brief about Namal, where I come primarily from, and I've been associated with SPS for almost a year now, probably. We have been jointly working on different projects where we are trying to engage the student community with the industry, and SPS has been kind enough to bridge that gap which we have between the academia and industry in the country. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the administration of SPS and Spin Labs to take these initiatives of special interest groups where industry is getting in direct contact with the academia, with the faculty and students as well, under different initiatives. So because my projects are related to the agriculture sector, so let's start with with some facts of agriculture sector, and some of those facts have been mentioned in the opening remarks of Mr. Hashim. We might be aware that 70%, almost 70% of Pakistan is rural. Almost 21% of the GDP comes from the agriculture sector. And interestingly, almost half of the total workforce in the country is employed by this sector. We have almost 65% of the population who is directly or indirectly linked with the agriculture sector. And while being an agrarian country, we have around 27% of the area which is under cultivation. So these are the broader statistics which probably lay down the canvas of Pakistan as far as agriculture is concerned. And we are the 4th largest cotton producing country in the world. But unfortunately, our agriculture GDP contribution has declined over the last decade. And according to some of the statistics of FAO, of United Nations, and even our finance ministry, our total agriculture production is almost half of its potential. So there is a whole collection or complete entire paradigm where farmers face different kinds of issues as far as agriculture sector is concerned. Over here in this discussion, we'll be talking about 2 kinds of problems. The first problem is timely diagnosis of the diseases of different crops. So in the rural areas, like other facilities, there is a lack of availability of expert opinion, where we don't have sufficient number of experts available in the rural areas who can guide farmers, particularly when there are outbreaks of different diseases. And there is a sort of disconnect between the experts based in primarily the urban headquarters and the farmers working in the fields. At the same time, farmers depend significantly upon the crop health. So timely and accurate diagnosis of crop diseases is very critical. So that's one side of the story which farmers face in the field. Or if some of you are coming from the agriculture background, you probably may completely or partially agree with me with these kind of facts which we have. At the same time, we have an opportunity at hand in terms of technology. So we are well aware that over the last decade or maybe a couple of decades, there has been a significant penetration of technology in the lives of common man. And particularly the penetration of smartphones has changed so many things in our lives, the ways we actually live, the ways we actually depend on the information from our smartphones. And at the same time, the era of machine learning has also started impacting our daily life in different aspects. So what we have done over here at Namal, because the projects which we are undertaking over here at Namal, they are very much aligned with the vision of Namal, that we are working for the development of rural sector. So Namal established a center over here named as Nisar Aziz Agri-Tech Center. And under the umbrella of this center, we are undertaking these projects where we, by we I mean the students, the research assistants who are working with me and myself and some of our collaborators. We have proposed to exploit the power of machine learning where we can diagnose diseases of crops by capturing their images. And at the back end, we use neural networks and deep learning models to train upon the infected and healthy images of crops and eventually embed the capacity to diagnose the crop diseases automatically. So the project which I'm talking about right now, in this project we have a crop coverage of two crops. One is maize, the other one is potato, and there is a variety of diseases which are quite common diseases in these two crops, which we are covering. We spent I think significant effort in collecting the data. Some of the data was easily available, which was publicly. We got some data which was publicly available from this repository named as Plant Village. This data was primarily contributed by Penn State University. And then we had another free data source repository of OSF where we collected the data from. And then the number of students and research assistants, they kept on roaming around and they were able to collect about 1,200 images of the infected crops of corn as well as potato from Gojra, Tobatek Singh, Balwal, and Sargodha. So these are the kind of snapshots of the data which we have been collecting as far as the infected crops of corn and potato are concerned. These are the 3 sample images of corn. So at the back end, technically speaking, what we did was that we leveraged different libraries in Python, and we used Amazon SageMaker Studio to create and deploy our machine learning models using Amazon Web Services. And we are using Firebase for some of our database related stuff at the back end. And we used Android Studio to develop mobile applications. So the way the story works, because I might be going in little abstract stuff, but I'll also try to give you a fair level of idea that how things work at the back end, because I'm not sure about the profile of audience, whether you are like experts in machine learning or you might be just like beginning your journey in the domain of machine learning. So this is the structure of a simple neural network. Right? More specifically speaking, this is one neuron of the network, so which lays down the foundation of the entire neural network and deep learning paradigms. So on the left side, we have inputs. Those inputs are the features. So in our context, those inputs are the features which we collect from an image, which our farmer feeds through the smartphone. Farmer uses our application, which I'll show you in a while. It's named as Meri Fasal. So we feed this image to Meri Fasal, and at the back end, this neural network extracts different features. By features, we mean different components of the image. You may consider those components as pixels, and then each of those features which are extracted from the input, they are multiplied with the corresponding weights. And then over here we have weighted sum of all those input features, and then that weighted sum is passed through an activation function, and we yield an output over here. So in our context, this output is the diagnosed disease eventually. So when the neural network starts processing these images, we are not really sure that whether the diagnosed disease is correct or not correct. So in the context of machine learning, we call it supervised learning. And by supervised learning, we mean that the images which are being used to train this neural network, those images are labeled with the actual diseases. So in our context, we got some publicly labeled data, and for the data which we collected locally, we got that labeled by the experts. So somebody manually would have told us that whether this is a healthy image or it's an infected image. And in the case of having the infected images, we might be having the information of the actual disease as well with the disease name. So, but when we pass that information to our neural network, it's supposed to diagnose the disease automatically, and then we compare the diagnosed disease with the actual disease which we have as part of our label. So the difference is computed as error. So then we use this. So ideally, the error should be 0, and by 0 error we mean that uh, by 0 error we mean that the diagnosed disease is actually the correct one, the actual disease. So, but if the error is not 0, then we use we try to propagate that error back to the network, and we try to compute the kind of differentials which you can see in these big fonts. Like, for example, we compute the rate of change of error with respect to each weight. So for all weights, we compute these partial derivatives, but these computation of these derivatives is not that obvious because the error has been computed by the output which has been just received from the neural network, and this output is dependent on the stuff which has been passed to the activation function, and what has been passed to activation function is dependent on the weights which are being used. So, so, if we look closely at this entire structure, we can then compute our objective, our bigger goal, which was rate of change of error with respect to the weights, by breaking it down into pieces. That, for example, error is directly dependent on the output we are receiving from the network. The output which we are receiving from the network is directly dependent on what is being passed to the activation function, whom we call netj. And netj is actually dependent on a variety of weights which are being passed, which are being used in the neural network. So we call it chain rule, and using the chain rule, we update these weights. So the way we update these weights is that this rate of change of error propagates back, and what we do is that using this rate of change of error, multiplying it with some very small constant known as learning rate, we compute the change in weight. And we do this exercise for all weights of the network. So the visualization on the previous screen was a smaller subset of the whole network. So, and then what we do is that we change each weight with the delta, and we get the new weights. So, and when we get the new weights, we repeat the exercise again and see if there is an error. If the error is still there, then that rate of change of error with respect to each weight is computed again, and we keep on doing this exercise again and again until we end up into the desired results. So the desired results would be that our network would be ending up into a set of weights of the network, which will be ideal to predict things correctly. So this is what we call backpropagation algorithm, and this actually serves as a fundamental building block of any neural network. And as the neural networks get more complex in terms of number of hidden layers in between, so we call them deep neural networks. But the essence of learning actually remains same. In fact, in terms of number of computations, it keeps on getting a little complicated. So just like coming back from that slightly abstract idea of how the neural networks work, let me show you how the application works. So this is our application, whom we call Meri Fasal, developed by Nisar Aziz Agritech Center. This application is available in Urdu as well as English for the farmers. So farmer selects a crop. So at the moment we have this application ready for corn as well as potato. So somebody, for example, selects corn, then you select the images from your gallery, or you can take the live photos. And now the image is being passed to the network at the backend. In our case, it's Amazon Web Service. And you might notice that different images are being passed, and network is analyzing them and then outputting name of a disease. For example, in this case, if you can see on the screen, it was common rust of corn. So you may see a few more snapshots of the way this app Meri Fasal is working. We are aiming to launch this app within this month with the potential to diagnose diseases of corn as well as potato. Currently, we are testing it in the field. So these were the kind of different diseases uh, being represented by different kinds of symptoms which are being diagnosed automatically. This is the healthy leaf, which we have passed to the app, and it's saying it's healthy. And then we passed some other healthy image. Now we are passing it an arbitrary image of a keyboard, and we have actually trained it on some other objects which are not leaves, just to make sure that so for example, it says Ibrahim Karamwaze Patti ki tasveer upload karen, which means it did not take it as a leaf image. So we actually did some empirical study at the backend. We tried different models. We used some well-known pre-built models like Fast.ai was used and evaluated. We built our own model, our own convolutional neural network model from scratch, whose testing results on unseen data were slightly better than Fast AI, and eventually we deployed it using this platform of AWS, Amazon Web Services, SageMaker, and it outperformed all of our existing models, primarily because of the reason that it had some functionality of built-in background uh, and pre-processing, built-in background subtraction and pre-processing modules inside it. So it performed really well. We ended up into a classification accuracy of more than 98% on AWS SageMaker, where it was around 85% on our own built model. So for example, these are different infected images which we pass to our app. And over here we have a lot of background noise, so it did not really predict. The disease actually was late blight, but our system predicted it as early blight. But in most of the cases, over here you can see it's not a correct prediction. But like in most of cases, you can see that the actual predictions are same. Actually, the predicted outputs are same. So these are the kind of images which we are testing upon, which were not used as the training data set. So this was the kind of introduction or little probably details of the first project. Now coming to the last component of my presentation and the second project which we are undertaking at Nisar Aziz Agri-Tech Center at Namal. This is soil analysis using machine learning. So by soil analysis, we mean that this is an ongoing project. So soil analysis is a process to determine the composition of different nutrients in the soil. And then we analyze different characteristics of soil, including the physical and chemical properties. So the conventional process includes these steps that go to the field, we take soil samples, take them to the laboratory. The colleagues in laboratory analyze those samples, and based on the analysis, we can give different recommendations to the farmers on the soil health and its preparedness for the cultivation. So these are the kind of chemical properties which soil has, including pH, electrical conductivity, phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, and many more. And then there are some physical characteristics like saturation percentage, color of soil, texture, etc. So this is the current process, the manual process which a farmer uses. Farmer goes to the field, takes the soil sample to the laboratory, and then the laboratory guys issue some results. But this entire process is laborious in terms of time, in terms of manpower, and in terms of cost as well. So, for example, according to the best of my knowledge, the soil laboratories of the governments are usually located at the tehsil headquarters. and then there's like whole tehsil area where the farmers themselves have to put efforts to take the samples of different corners of the soil, take them to the laboratory, and then fetch the results from the laboratory. By end of the day, where we end up is that this is not a common practice. So farmers usually really do not get indulged into this whole practice. There are very few farmers who actually take their samples to the laboratories in the tehsil headquarters and seek their advice. So what we are proposing is that we are trying to develop a mobile application we name as Meri Zameen. So the idea is that Meri Zameen will be again Urdu-based mobile application on smartphones. Farmers goes to the field, selects its location in the field, its location in terms of its coordinates, long length coordinates. They're fed to a pre-trained machine learning model, and the machine learning model is expected to predict the nutrients of that particular patch of soil and generate a soil report for the farmer. So what we are trying to do right now is that we are using approximate case-based reasoning as a backend engine, which is a subfield of machine learning, to take the inputs in terms of location and then generate the output in terms of soil analysis. So what we have done so far is that we have acquired a data set of more than 200,000 soil samples from the Punjab government. They were kind enough to give us access to the data. We pre-processed that data, we cleaned the data, we discretized the data with the help of the experts of soil science, which we have at our Agritech Center. And at the back end, what we did was that we tried to use case-based reasoning. So if you are like coming from the machine learning background, then I would like to very quickly comment on that why we did why we went for the machine learning, why we went for the case-based reasoning option. So case-based reasoning is primarily dependent on the k-nearest neighborhood, and it has the capacity to start learning from a very small amount of data, and then with the passage of time, it has the potential to improve its learning curve and eventually end up into the global maxima or global optimal point. So then we had certain performance issues within the conventional CBR process, and then we went for Monte Carlo version of randomized clustered approach of CBR, which I'll discuss briefly in a while. So these are some statistics, the kind of stuff which we did was with the data. There were some noisy data points which we deleted. So we ended up with the clean data, and then we discretize the data, we divide the data into groups. So these bins, these groupings, these categories were primarily defined manually with the help of the soil science experts for each expected output parameter like pH, EC, P, K, OM, SP, etc. So after doing pinning, you may observe from here that we actually transformed our entire soil data into a classification problem. So this is a snapshot of the discretized data. This is how the data is looking like. For example, Pipla is a tehsil in Mia Valley. So this is a particular location where the data soil sample was taken from, and these are the different classes where these output parameters are located in. So as I've mentioned a while ago, k-nearest neighbor and case-based reasoning are the lazy learning techniques. Unlike the eager learning techniques like neural networks and decision trees, so the eager machine learning techniques actually demand a lot of data to train upon and then freeze the model and then deploy it. But the lazy learning model actually can be deployed without freezing the model, and it can keep on learning with the passage of time as it is exposed to more data. So eager learner must create a global approximation before the deployment. That's what we expect from it. As far as lazy learner is concerned, by learner I mean the machine learning model. Lazy learner can create many local approximations and keep on evolving its learning curve as it is exposed to more experience. So this is the broader paradigm. This is how case-based reasoning works. We have a case base, which is a repository of all cases. By case, we mean that it's a problem solution pair. So this is the past data. In our case, this is the data of the government, which is the pre-processed data which we have stored over here. So whenever a new problem comes in our case, this is location, long-led coordinates of a new location. So what we do is that we compare that location with all cases over here, and we fetch a set of nearest neighbors over here. Then set of nearest neighbors are primarily, this is a subset of the bigger case base, and we know their solutions. So we aggregate their known solutions to plan a new solution. And then we can use some adaptation algorithm to revise or adapt the solution, and eventually that new solution is retained back into the case base. So complexity is higher because as the time goes on, our number of comparisons with the case base keep on increasing, because we continuously keep on retaining the newly solved problem in our case base just to strengthen our knowledge base. So it will get further higher as we keep on spending more time and keep on solving more problems. So the positive side is that knowledge improves because we are gathering more data. But the downside is that retrieval cost keeps on continuously increasing, and eventually it leads to a bottleneck as far as performance is concerned. So the idea was to partition the case base, to group the database into different clusters. So we deployed different clustering algorithms to partition our case base into appropriate number of clusters. So for example, by clustering, we mean that we have this whole data set. We divide it into different groups. So each color is representing a group. And then each cluster has a representative over here, whom we call cluster center or centroid. So technically speaking, we used k-means, and then later on we used fuzzy c-means as well to cluster the data into appropriate number of clusters, and then we were focusing more on their centers. So whenever there is a new problem, instead of comparing it with the entire case space, we only compare that new problem with the centroids of all clusters, which are much lesser than the total number of data points. And once we are done with that, then we actually confine the solution space of the new problem within a cluster. So the cluster which was the closest cluster of that particular new problem, that serves as a solution space. Then we apply the case-based reasoning model only on that cluster, and we ignore rest of the clusters. And that way we actually save a lot of time in terms of number of comparisons. So we worked around this. We tried to identify the optimal number of clusters, which in literature, even in the machine learning literature, this is an open problem. There is no easy answer to identify that how many clusters will work for you. So, but just to give you an idea, for example, for PH, we ended up in more than 80% accuracy using case-based reasoning on our Punjab data. For EC, we ended up in more than 95% accuracy. For SP, we ended up into again more than 80% accuracy. So little more detailed results. The EC was very good. Organic matter was very good, but there were some parameters which have not been predicted that well so far. So, for example, P is a nutrient which is not being predicted well. Its accuracy is low as compared to the other ones. Same is the case of SP. So just to give you a very quick idea of this app, this is Meri Zameen app. So the farmer actually selects the location. So this kind of soil report is generated. So here we are trying to pinpoint a location near Mianwali. And this is the soil report which has been generated using the approximate case species using at the back end. Then besides doing this kind of machine learning research, we have a soil lab at Nisar Aziz Agri-Tech Center, and then we try to cross-validate our results with the ground realities. So we collected so the points which we are using in testing our app, we are also collecting physical samples from there, and just to cross-validate them, we are passing them to the soil lab based in our center, and they are trying to analyze those samples chemically and share our results. So far, these are the kind of results of our cross-validation with the ground truths. A very last component of this is that so the discussion which we have so far, we are using location as the input parameter. So we did try to use the RGB images as the input, but we could not really end up into any attractive results. So very recently, what we have tried to explore is that we are exploring this hyperspectral imagery of soil. We were lucky enough to have access to this data set of LUCAS, which is the soil data of European Commission of different European countries. So we are currently exploring this data and trying to work around this data, that whether this data can actually help us or whether machine learning can actually exploit this hyperspectral imagery to analyze the soil in terms of its nutrients. So this is a very high dimensional data, and we have more than 20,000 data points of the data. We are applying PCA to reduce its number of dimensions, and then we are trying different machine learning algorithms. So far, we have tried random forest, and we got some results with different settings of the PCA. We also tried neural network on the reduced number of dimensions, and then so the kind of performance which we have gotten so far is around 75-76% is the peak point where we have ended up so far, but this is our ongoing work, and we are currently working around this thing. I'm about to reach towards the end of my presentation. So ICT has a positive impact in many disciplines of our daily life, including healthcare, business, education, communication, etc. And by ICT, if we like slightly confine or narrow down our meanings or our interpretation of ICT, so we can very easily replace ICT with artificial intelligence or machine learning. And you might be very well aware that we have so many apps and so many other intelligent services which are happening around us, e-commerce, e-business, even the health sector, where ICT and machine learning have been leveraged very successfully. Pakistan is an agricultural country with rich potential, which we discussed at the start. So ICT in general and machine learning in specific has immense scope in bringing deeper impact on our agricultural economy. And probably the need of the time is that we need to focus more on interdisciplinary and integrated teaching, research, and collaborations amongst all stakeholders, starting from farmers, going up till the academia, the researchers in the universities, and the industry, and the government as well, so that we can really take benefit of this opportunity, and we can capitalize on the potential which we have in the country. The last thing, which is a food for thought, which I would really want to highlight and would like to discuss with you as well, that is that these are some statistics, and please pay little attention to these statistics because, in my opinion, these are mind-blowing statistics. That we take an example of Netherlands. It's a small country, so its cultivable area is 2 million hectares. If we compare ourselves with Netherlands, we have 10 times more area as far as cultivable area is concerned in the country. And if we like compare some financial statistics, for example, I tried to fetch these statistics of 2020 that agriculture and food export of Netherlands was approximately 95 billion euro last year. And if we compare it with ourselves, so with the potential of with a 10 times bigger potential as far as our cultivation space is concerned, we could only end up in approximately 3 to 4 billion euros export of our agriculture and food products. And Netherlands is the second largest exporter of agri and food products after US. US is the first one, and then Germany, Brazil, and China take third, fourth, and fifth positions. And usually these positions sometimes can keep on getting rotated. So the question is, why is it so? So this was even a question for me, and you can also think around it. But interestingly, I could come up with one answer, and that was the answer that Netherlands, for example, has a university which is not that famous in our part of the world, and probably the people coming from the agriculture sector may be like well aware of the standing of Wageningen University. They pronounce it as Wageningen University. Wageningen University is the #1 university in the world in agriculture. And I think a couple of years back, it was #1 in the QS ranking in agriculture, and #2 was UC Berkeley. And so I think probably this kind of information, I think to some extent, supports my conclusion on the previous slide that see a very small country with a little potential is leading the entire industry, primarily probably because of the very strong linkage of the universities and the industry. And the universities are doing the kind of research which is very relevant and which is actually boosting their economy in that particular sector. So universities and their numbers, their financial numbers and their overall standing in the world in that particular domain, they all are going hand in hand. Right? And we are like very well aware of our academic standing and our universities, that where globally we stand, and probably our financial numbers are also a reflection of the kind of stuff which we are doing in the university. So I think if I go back to that last bullet again, just to emphasize it, that this is interdisciplinary and integrated teaching, research, and collaboration is a very dire need of the time. As compared to our conventional ways of doing these kind of things. So thank you very much for your patience. I think I might have taken more time. Probably I might have taken the time which was supposed to be taken by Dr. Arshad, but I'm sorry for the going a little beyond.
No, Dr. This is totally fine. I think it was valuable for audience, and in fact, I wanted to keep knowing more about what you're saying. So thanks again for joining, and I think a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. So with this, we can open the floor for discussion, and we can start with the questions. If somebody would like to share their thoughts or comments or have any question for Dr. Malik, you can unmute yourselves and ask right now. Or we can also have a quick round of introductions, which we normally do at the end of our sessions. So I see a couple of new faces, and I'll ask your name, and if you would care to share, please let us know what are your interests in AI and some of the projects that you may be working on. So I see Mr. Zishan Ramzan. Sir, would you like to unmute and share with the rest of us? Next we have Yasinul Haq.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Yasin Haq, and I'm a PhD scholar. Sir, can you listen me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Yasin Haq, and I am doing PhD under the supervision of Professor Dr. Shabazz in Computer Science Department, UET Lahore. And my research topic is identify soil type using remote sensing and machine learning. And the presentation gave by Dr. Saab was very informative and useful. And inshallah, it will help me in order to accomplish my research work. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for your efforts.
Thank you very much, Yasin sir. We can definitely talk later on, and you may get in touch because you are like doing a very similar kind of stuff which we are doing over here. So we can definitely collaborate as well, and we will be more than happy if we can assist you in your PhD work.
Dr. Saab, can I get more assistance regarding RGS? Are you working on this tool as well?
Sorry, which tool?
Have you worked with RGIS?
No, sorry, I didn't use this. This is remote GIS kind of thing?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Right. No, sorry, I didn't use it.
Ji,
But
yes.
I know Shehbaz Saab, so I think and Namal has been working as an affiliate college of UT Lahore. So we have some like other institutional kind of relationship as well. So we can definitely leverage that relationship.
Sure.
Sir?
Yeah. Ji, Yasin, do you have any other question? I think there could be a problem with the mic, yeah. But I think Dr. Malik has got your point, and Dr. Malik knows Dr. Shehbaz. So, you know, if there are no other comments, then we can close this session. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Malik for taking time out to prepare the presentation and share with the audience today. And the next session on AI will be 4 weeks from now. And in that session, we'll be having we will be having a change of format in a sense where we'll be having resources from the US who represent the overseas alumni from Pakistan who have reached great places in the western part of the world, and so we are bringing some exciting things in the upcoming sessions. And the next session immediately after this AI seg is going to be on cloud. So stay tuned if you're interested. Everything is interconnected nowadays. Most of the AI APIs and services are available on cloud. So that is going to be on next Thursday at 5:30 p.m. If there are no other comments or questions, we can close this. Yes.
I'd like to make some comments, please. Yeah. So Dr. Saab, I was not planning to say much. I'm not well, but I did not want to miss your session, and I'm so glad that I did not. I think I could have played the recording, but that would not have had the same impact as listening to you live. And I have a fairly good idea of AI and how it works. Like in Aapke session, it further simplified it and made it more understandable for me. What I really loved was the fact that you have created those two apps and they're so easy and simple to use, yet so powerful in the back end. And I think the best part was the way you connected the role that University, Wageningen University in Netherlands played and kind of opened our eyes to the potential that is there. So I'm so glad that I listened to your presentation, and thank you so much for making the time. I know you've got plenty of things to do, and this did take a lot of time. So thank you so much. It's an honor to know somebody at your caliber.
I'm actually very much honored to have you here in the session, sir, because I was not expecting that you'll join us because of probably the time, it might be quite early in the US. And thank you very much for joining despite your health issues. I think we'll connect offline, probably over email or some other chat to discuss the different things. It has been quite a long time that we could not really directly communicate. But thank you very much for your kind words and wishes and guidance. And I actually highly appreciate the kind of efforts which you are actually putting in uplifting this entire sort of canvas of academia and industry linkage in the country. So I think the contributions which SPS is making, you have engaged many universities, and this is wonderful. Thank you very much for your kind words. I actually take you as a mentor, so we learn so many things from you, and I've been actually learning for almost a year now from
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, and like I said, I'm going to personally reach out and maybe have a session together.
Inshallah, inshallah, sir. Get well soon.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. and have a really good evening. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you very much, Hashim Sir, for arranging, and Ahmad Jafar for all the arrangements and reminders. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.